You've probably experienced this. You come up with a great idea or execute an excellent pitch, and someone else tries to take the credit for your work. Maybe it's a minor idea, an offhand comment another team member has decided to run with, or maybe it's a promotion-worthy new innovation that you've been spending lots of time honing before presenting, when suddenly that colleague you confided in is pitching it to senior leadership. At best, it's a mild annoyance, as you politely but firmly correct the mistake. At worst, it's detrimental to your mental health, because it turns out this is a common occurrence. Someone else is getting the rewards for your work, and you are left in the dust. Either way, it feels kind of crummy. But now that you're the boss, it's time to really tackle that challenge head on. Because look, credit stealing and knowledge theft are surprisingly common, and they're also super detrimental to the health and well-being of a team. But what can you do about it? Can you stop credit stealing from becoming a recurring problem? And if you work for a culture replete with knowledge thievery, what, if anything, can you do to change things? Hi, I'm Mandi Gosling, host of Manage This, a series for everyone playing manager in the middle. Each episode, we help managers tackle everyday problems that seem to pop up when you're both leading a team and being managed in return. This episode is Credit Where Credit's Due: How to Stop Knowledge Thievery in its tracks. Because no one likes a credit stealer, and you really don't want your team to be full of them. Let's start with a sobering statistic. A recent study from the University of Toronto found that 91% of people have either been the victim or perpetrator of knowledge theft.
This is not a low base rate behavior that only happens some of the time. It happens quite frequently in organizations. We sampled large groups of people working in different industries across different countries, and we found that this occurs pretty much everywhere.
That's David Zweig, a professor of organizational behavior and HR management at the University of Toronto. He studies workplace deviance. That is a thing. The bad behavior people undertake at organizations, and how organizations are set up to encourage or discourage that behavior. He's also the author of the study on knowledge theft, one of the first research papers looking specifically at the issue of credit stealing at an organizational level. So, why is knowledge theft a problem? Well, the short answer is that it creates a toxic environment that discourages knowledge sharing. The long answer:
if it happens once, we kind of say to ourselves, okay, maybe that was just an oversight, right? And maybe, I'm upset about it. I don't want it to happen again, but maybe that was unintentional. But what we're finding is that if this happens more than once, or if it's obvious that someone is intentionally taking your credit for your idea or your work, this has really negative effects on people's emotions, their attitudes, and their actual behaviors. Of course, it elicits a lot of anger, a lot of upset. People feel like their territory is being violated because they're having this idea or this work stolen from them. And what that leads to are a series of behaviors that actually stifle knowledge management and knowledge sharing. People in our studies reported that if they experience knowledge theft, they end up hiding their future ideas. They don't share them with others, they actively hide them. Or they engage in something called defensive silence, where they just stay quiet and they don't offer anything in group discussions or teamwork, etc., because they don't want their ideas to be stolen again. They don't help each other solve issues or solve problems. They don't share their ideas. And it actually also translates into their own behaviors, where they try to retaliate against the people who have stolen their credit for their ideas or their work in subtle and not so subtle ways, and they try and get back at them for what they did. So it sets off this cascade of really bad behavior.
Organizations thrive when knowledge is shared amongst colleagues and peers. Knowledge sharing is actually one of the key ingredients for innovation. Random chance encounters. Say, Bob is talking about a project, bouncing ideas off Carol, when suddenly, bam! Carol remembers a side project she's working on. And hey, maybe the two of us should work together to bring this new idea to the boss. We actually spoke to a Rotman professor last year on our Rotman Executive Summary podcast about the way knowledge sharing shapes novel and conventional ideas. We'll drop a link to the episode in the description for those who are interested in learning more. When you have a culture of secrecy where people are afraid to share those ideas, they clam up, taking that innovation goodness with them. And okay, so your organization might not get that big new idea. Who cares, right? Well, it's not exactly a victimless crime here. If Carol is constantly taking Bob's brilliant ideas and passing them off as her own, she's more likely to be rewarded.
One of the participants told us that they were working on some research ideas, and a colleague of theirs decided to take that idea and pursue it on their own, and then take that idea and publish it in a top-tier journal. That's actually a big deal. Another participant talked about having coworkers use a proposal that they came up with and take credit for that proposal. For example, they talked about how the team was looking for a new way to implement a performance evaluation system. They came up with a solution, showed it to a coworker, and that coworker then presented it as their own work 2 weeks later and got promoted as a result. So we have instance after instance of people describing how their ideas are either stolen or someone takes credit for their work, and then they lose out on the recognition, they lose out on promotion opportunities and whatever ensues that they should have received given that was their idea or their work.
Put another way, people don't work out of the goodness of their hearts. They work for incentives and rewards. So if you want the best work out of people, you really do need to be thinking how to best reward them. When you have a knowledge thief on your hands, that erodes the trust that the right people are actually getting rewarded. David adds that toxic behavior like this has a lasting impact on your team at their next gig.
What we found in our research was that even people who had experienced knowledge theft in a different organization, not even the one they're currently working in, they carried that with them to the new organization. And so even if it occurred in a completely different organization, might even be in a different industry, whatever it is, they carry those scars with them, and that influences their behavior in the current organization. So they are engaging less, they're sharing less of their information, sharing less of their knowledge, they're being very territorial about what is theirs.
So what can you do about this? First, David reminds people that it's easier to stop this from becoming a cultural issue than trying to fix the culture once it's broken. So if you spot a knowledge theft in progress, it's super important to nip it in the bud. That can be as simple as literally calling it out publicly in the moment. Hey, Carol, thanks for bringing back Bob's idea from a few weeks ago. Bob, do you have anything you want to add? Or you can do it in private.
What's important there is to have a discussion with the person who stole the knowledge thief, and say, look, I think that idea came from Mandi. And it's really important that Mandi get credit for coming up with that idea. You might have built on it, you might have changed it somewhat, but the original idea or the intent or even the work came from her directly. And it's important that she gets recognized for that work.
Basically, you're pointing out here that you know the idea was stolen and you aren't going to tolerate it. And to the victim, David would say,
look, I know that was your work. We are going to correct that assumption, and you are going to get credit for the fact that that was your idea, that was your work, whatever it was. And that was an oversight, and I don't want that to happen again.
It's important to also really be mindful of whether this is a one-off issue. Carol slipped once and probably didn't even realize she stole the idea, or a persistent problem that's taken hold.
If you have a team that's working with you and they're reluctant to provide input, they're reluctant to provide solutions to problems, they're reluctant to get engaged in group decision making, or they're very, very careful about identifying, this is what I did, this is my idea, then you know something is going on.
If you do realize you have a persistent problem on the team, this is where you get to start your next modeling gig.
I report to people higher up than me, but I make sure that I do that. I acknowledge people's input, efforts, and ideas with the team that I work with. And I do that in front of others, right? So when I'm talking about my team's initiatives to people higher up, I absolutely always am very cognizant of making sure that I identify the team members who were involved in that project and who are responsible for the success of that project, for example. I'm not taking the credit for it in isolation. I'm identifying those people. That sends the message to others that this is a good behavior to emulate. We hope that that message gets up to people at a higher level where they see, the people I work with responding well to that kind of recognition. If it's normalized that people take credit for other people's work or steal other people's ideas, how do you put a stop to that? It's again going back to you need to be the person who stops that behavior and really provides an example for others that, nope, this is wrong. We are not going to promote this behavior anymore. People are not going to be rewarded for stealing other people's work or ideas. And we're going to acknowledge every person's contribution.
There were also 2 specific interventions that the researchers tried that had a huge impact on mitigating the negative effect of knowledge thievery. The first really is calling it out in the moment.
We did a series of experimental studies where we manipulated people's experiences of knowledge theft, where they had their ideas or their work stolen. We put people in different situations where their leader actually said, hold on, I know that that was your idea. Why isn't that person getting credit for that idea?
The second is creating a system where people can claim credit for ideas publicly.
We had one paradigm where we had an organizational knowledge management system where people could put their ideas down and put their names on them so that it couldn't be stolen so easily afterwards. And both of those interventions actually had a really positive effect on eliminating all of the negative emotions and behaviors that come from our experience of knowledge theft. So those small things, simply calling it out, either a leader or even a colleague who calls it out, or even a system in place where people can record their contributions and ideas and put their stamp on it as their own, seems to mitigate the negative outcomes of all of this knowledge theft.
If this is a bigger cultural issue, or if you spot that other departments are trying to take credit for your employees' hard work, then it's time to take it up to the boss.
Everyone's going to handle it differently. The situation's going to be different. The context will be different. I mean, how I would handle it personally is having a discussion with my boss, if they're open to that discussion, around what it means to work in an environment where people feel afraid to share their knowledge and share their ideas, and how that influences the performance of the team or even the organization. And to talk about how important it is for people to be appropriately recognized for their contributions, for their work, for their ideas, and how motivating that is and how that helps the team actually thrive.
So, have you ever had an idea stolen? Did it stifle innovation later on? Will you be a bigger advocate for transparent credit? Are there other challenges you want us to tackle in future episodes? Weigh in the comments below and consider subscribing to this series, or our whole YouTube channel, or the Rotman Insights Hub. Just click the link in the description to get more thought leadership and research-backed management tips from the Rotman community delivered to your inbox every other week. Thanks for watching.